Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a Fox News segment that does something really interesting. It smashes together two completely different stories, one about a congresswoman's finances and another about the Super Bowl halftime show. Let's dig into how it connects these two worlds to build one single narrative.
Okay, so right out of the gate, the source material grabs your attention with this massive number, $30 million. This figure is basically the hook for the entire first half of the segment, and it's used to launch an investigation into the finances of a pretty prominent U.S. congresswoman.
All right, so the first part of this is all about Democratic Representative Ilhan Omar and her husband. And the core of the story really is this accusation of hypocrisy that's built around what the source presents as this just stunning and questionable explosion of their personal wealth. Now, to frame this whole narrative of hypocrisy, the source first reminds viewers of Representative Omar's own public statements. It uses clips of her, fiercely criticizing capitalism, calling for the uber-rich to be taxed heavily, and even accusing them of stealing their wealth. This sets a baseline, a really stark contrast for the financial claims that are about to come up. And here's where they really lay out the central accusation. The segment zooms in on the financial disclosures tied to her husband's businesses. They claim the value just skyrocketed from a pretty modest $51,000 all the way up to that $30 million figure. The source doesn't just state this, though. It frames it as a stunning rise that really demands an explanation. So a huge part of the story becomes how this is all being investigated. The source explains that the investigation is actually taking a pretty unconventional path, and that move alone has sparked its own battle on Capitol Hill. It's a really key part of the story they're telling. The segment lays out the official rationale, and it comes from Representative James Comer. His argument is basically this. Yeah, the Ethics Committee usually handles member conduct, but its authority doesn't really extend to a spouse's business. Therefore, his House Oversight Committee is the correct and necessary body to be running this specific investigation. But to show both sides, the source immediately pivots to the counterargument from the Democrats on that very same committee. They're shown calling the whole move unprecedented and a pretty direct attempt to politicize the committee, suggesting that this breaks with how things are normally done for a specific reason. Okay, so from there, things really escalate. The segment brings in a guest who takes these financial questions and elevates them into something much, much more serious, a deliberate and calculated political scheme. And this is where the details get really specific. The guest, Kaylee McGee-White, just starts rattling off this list of red flags that are meant to cast doubt on the husband's businesses. She claims the investment firm is basically a ghost. No clients, no SEC registration. The winery? Can't find a website, no products to buy. And then, to top it all off, she points to a recent lawsuit from an investor who is alleging fraud. And here is where they connect the dots for the viewer in a really powerful way. The guest doesn't just raise questions, she offers this politically charged answer. She alleges that Omar and her husband have cracked the Hunter Biden playbook, explicitly calling their actions an influence peddling scheme. This ties the story directly into a much larger, ongoing political battle. And then, bam! Just as the political accusations hit their peak, the segment does a complete 180. The topic instantly shifts from a congressional financial probe to a totally different arena, the culture war over the Super Bowl halftime show. And this isn't random. It's a very deliberate choice in how the story is built. So suddenly, we're talking about an event hosted by the conservative group Turning Point USA. And it's presented not just as a concert, but as a real cultural statement, a successful alternative halftime show for millions of Americans who, according to the source, are actively looking for an escape from the mainstream broadcast. And to back this up, the source throws up some pretty impressive numbers for the event, which was headlined by Kid Rock. It highlights 5 million views on YouTube alone and a whopping 26 million total views across all platforms, framing it as a genuine cultural phenomenon that you just can't ignore.
And they make it super clear this isn't just a one-time thing. A spokesperson is quoted promising this will become an annual tradition, and they boldly predict that viewership is going to grow to 40, maybe even 50 million. The framing here is so important. This is being done for the country.
So the obvious question is, why? Why jam these two stories together? Well, this segment's guest comes back to provide the cultural glue, explaining that the appeal of this alternative show is a direct reaction against everything the official show represents.
The justification is presented as this very stark cultural choice. On one side, you have the official show with Bad Bunny, which the guest labels profane and vulgar. with lyrics so explicit they say they couldn't even be broadcast in English. Then on the other side, you have the Turning Point show, positioned as the wholesome, family-friendly option, a uniquely American event. The battle lines are drawn really clearly here.
The guest then boils all this down to a feeling of cultural grievance. She poses this question, suggesting that while other cultures get to celebrate their heritage, like she claims Bad Bunny did, Americans are somehow discouraged from celebrating theirs. In this framing, the alternative show isn't just entertainment, it's about reclaiming a cultural space.
So when you step back and look at the whole thing, you can see how a media segment can weave a story of alleged political corruption together with a story of cultural division to create a single, cohesive narrative. By putting them right next to each other, the source connects alleged hypocrisy from one politician with what it portrays as a decadent mainstream culture. It then offers up a conservative, patriotic movement as the solution to both. And this leaves us with a pretty big question. What narrative is being built for the viewer when the lines between a political fight and a culture war are so intentionally blurred?